Well, tonight's master class is Nourishing Your Body, Mastering Micronutrient Balance in Today's Toxic World. And yeah, so right here, those that are live, you already know who I am. I am Shawna Cale, right? And I'd like to thank you for joining me in this masterclass. But this masterclass is going to be going out with a resource that I'm putting together, a workbook that's going to have these slides plus more, because there is no way we can get to everything tonight. So I was trying to figure out, how do I put everything into a 1-hour class? Well, kind of like we try and do everything and we can't do everything. I could not get everything that I wanted to share with y'all in this class. And so I was like, you know what? I am going to put together a little workbook for y'all using these slides plus the things that we're not going to make to tonight. But I personally love to teach these master classes, not only for everybody that is live and that's on Facebook, but I also love to teach them because I found that we tend to think everything is just normal, like not feeling good is normal, being sick is normal. And in 2010, when I was at the peak of my own health crisis, I decided that normal was highly overrated, like I have on my t-shirt there, and decided to make some changes in my life. And here it is, a decade later. I am still on the health journey, and I'm still tired of hearing the word normal from those who practice Western medicine. So daily, I choose exceptional. And if you'd like to get to know me a little better, if you haven't read my story, I wrote a book where I say bye-bye to normal and I say hello to exceptional. And I share in the book how you can live a life of less stress and more energy. And I believe this topic that I am going to share today is so important. And again, I know that we are not going to have time to go over everything in an hour. So I'm putting together a workbook that you can download to get my slides that I'm showing tonight and clickable links to learn more, because there is so much about this micronutrient deficiency.
Recording progress.
Sometimes even micronutrient toxicity, which we don't usually think about, but we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight too. So our objectives right here for these classes, and right here you're going to see it says your item here, your item, because y'all, it's not done yet. There's so much information. So you can see right here the things that we're going to be going over tonight. And our objective for this masterclass is to understand that when we nourish our body, all right, when we nourish our body will have less stress and more energy, okay? And again, our main topic will be mastering micronutrient balance. And believe me when I say that's not as easy as it used to be, because we live in a very toxic world today, okay? But it's also not impossible when we have the knowledge of what micronutrients are and how we can utilize them in a way to have exceptional health. So I always like to start with a definition. So what is a micronutrient? Well, micronutrients are vitamins and minerals needed by the body in very small amounts, okay? However, their impact on a body's health are critical, and deficiency in any of them can cause severe and even life-threatening conditions. And there are hundreds, okay? There may be even more than hundreds, because we only have names for the ones we have names for, all right? So what do they do? What do micronutrients do? Well, they perform a range of functions, including enabling the body to produce enzymes. So if you have an enzyme issue, you might have a micronutrient issue. They help with hormones. So if you have a hormone issue, you might have a micronutrient issue, and other substances like neurotransmitters and some other things that we're not really going to get in tonight, but they're also needed for normal growth. Now, as I said right here, normal is highly overrated. But when I say normal growth right here, if we have abnormal growth, that could be a sign of a micronutrient issue. It could be a deficiency or it could be a toxicity. All right. So again, a lot of times we don't think about micronutrients as being a toxicity, but we're going to talk about that tonight. And development as a child and even development as we get older. Y'all, our brains are supposed to work until we stop breathing. Okay. That is a developmental thing. We should be able to learn something new. We're not an old dog, y'all. I'm just telling you. We should be able to learn something new as long as we can breathe. So I think we could all agree that micronutrients are probably pretty important for overall health. So this may be where we ask the question, how do I know if I'm mastering micronutrient balance? Because let's be honest, if my micronutrients are balanced, I don't really need the following information that I'm going to be sharing for the next hour, right? So you're going to be like, well, do I even need it? Well, I like to say it's best to assess, don't guess. Okay. And when it comes to how we're doing in the micronutrient department, a first step could be an assessment like the cell blueprint that just asks questions regarding how you feel, which can determine if you have the top signs and symptoms of imbalanced micronutrient levels. And then if that assessment shows that you have a micronutrient deficiency, what I like to call a red stop or an orange warning, or maybe even a yellow yield, then you may want to look at having micronutrient testing done. Now, I have a list on here, and there are several different types of tests, and all of them have some positives and negatives. Okay. So we typically think of blood test as being like the best kind of test, right? But when it comes to micronutrients, we need to remember that we want them in the cell. We want our micronutrients in the cell, not necessarily our blood. Our red blood cells, they don't even have mitochondria. So they're not getting into the cells at the mitochondrial level if we're just checking the blood. And if we have a high level in the blood, that could actually mean that it's not getting into the cell. And if it's low in the blood, it could mean that it is getting into the cell, but it shows up as low on our blood. And so I'm sorry, but Western medicine sometimes will say, hey, you have a micronutrient deficiency, and they're looking in the wrong place. I don't understand it, y'all. I'm just telling you what I know. Okay. So that's why some will say have a test that tests micronutrients in the cell instead of in the blood, specifically the red blood cells. And there's one that I specifically have had and like, it's called the SpectraCell, which is still a blood test, but they're looking at the white blood cells instead of the red blood cells. And it gives them a little bit more information on whether or not your cells are getting the micronutrients that they need. Now, when I had a SpectraCell done several years ago, it was amazing to see how balanced I was in most areas. Don't y'all like to take a test and like do good on it? Okay. So that was a test that I did pretty good on. Now, I did have one area that it showed that wasn't so good, and that was iron, which is kind of like my Achilles heel. Or is it? Because I've really been doing a lot of research on iron in the past few years. And the truth is, the scientists out there are still trying to figure some things out. Okay. So if you work with me, I am not going to be one to jump on the take iron bandwagon. And here's why. I did it way too many times and had very negative results. That's me. That doesn't mean you will. But again, because of all the research I've done, because of myself, it's not something I recommend from just because a blood test showing that you have low iron does not mean that you do not have iron in your body. Okay. And I was eating things that had iron in it. I was taking iron supplements, and my blood work still showed I had low iron. Where was the iron, right? Which leads us to some other tests like urine. And this can show how much micronutrients are actually leaving your body. And this can be helpful because our body always wants to keep things in balance. All right. So if you take too many of a water-soluble vitamin or too many minerals, your body's just going to excrete them. You're just going to pee them out. Anybody ever taken vitamin B? You see it in the water, right? It's because you have high levels of a specific micronutrient in your urine, and it's a good sign that your body's like, hey, that's enough. I'm going to get rid of the rest. All right. But here's the thing. It only means that you got enough for that day. All right. Because it kind of works on a 24, 48-hour cycle. The problem with this is that every day is a new day, right? And depending on what you've eaten and how your body's reacting and responding, you might be low in something on another day. You could also have too much of other kind of vitamins and minerals that are actually fat soluble. And what that happens is we're not going to see those in the urine unless we are fasting and breaking down a lot of fat, like during a fast, and then we excrete it in our urine that way. All right. So here's the thing. Again, you might have a urine test, and if they don't ask you, like, have you lost 5 pounds in the last week? They might think there's an issue because you're getting rid of some fat soluble vitamins, right? Well, it could be that you're getting rid of them because you're breaking them down because you're losing fat, which could be a good thing. Or it could be a not so good thing because you might be losing some micronutrients because you're losing too much fat at once. I know who says, can you lose too much fat at one time? Yes, you can. You can actually become micronutrient deficient from losing too much fat too fast. All right. Next is hair. And often you're going to hear this being called an HTMA, hair tissue mineral analysis. And why many practitioners like this is that our hair is actually made up of cells. All right. And the minerals are getting into the cells or not getting into them. And so we're able to test a hair to see what minerals, what vitamins are in there. I've had this done several times and it corresponds pretty well with my SpectraCell, except that it showed more toxicities than the SpectraCell showed. Okay, which means this test, I could also see what I may have too much of, especially when it comes to something like heavy metals. All right. Saliva is another test, and it's often used more for hormones. But here's the thing. Hormones are often able to tell us a lot about micronutrients and what might be out of balance based on our hormone levels. All right. Which leads us to bioenergetic scans. I currently do 2 scans. The Zyto scan, which I love for many reasons, but one is it does list top stressors, and I can see if any micronutrients are stressing out the body. Okay. Now here's the thing. It doesn't tell me if it's a deficiency or a toxicity. And then the next scan also helps me to see if there's a micronutrient that the body energetically is listing as a priority. Again, it doesn't tell me if it's a deficiency or toxicity, but does give me a place to start asking questions. All right. Which often leads me to another way to assess, and that is called muscle testing. And this is where we can ask the body if it is deficient or toxic with any of the micronutrients that may be listed. So as you can see here, there are a lot of different ways that we can assess, instead of just guessing, if we have some micronutrient levels that might be out of balance. All right. So let's discuss this for just a moment. All right. Our goal is not to have an excess in a micronutrient, but that we have a balance in all of our micronutrients. So we're going to talk a little bit about an imbalance. Deficiencies are things missing in the body causing stress. Okay. This could mean in insufficient intake of a specific micronutrient, or it could mean in an impaired absorption of certain micronutrients, meaning you're getting them in, but your body isn't getting them to the cell. And this is important because if you're constantly supplementing with something, let's use iron again, and you don't feel better, you even feel worse, that was me, yet your tests still show you're deficient, then we may need to look to see if it's an absorption issue. All right. Now, we also can look on the other side, which leads to toxicities. And these are things added in the body causing stress. Okay. This could be an excess intake, like taking iron. All right. When your body has enough of something and it goes over that amount, it can become toxic. Again, impaired absorption, meaning the micronutrient is actually getting stuck somewhere instead of getting to the cell where it needs to go. And again, for me, every time I took iron, I had terrible joint pain, meaning that I was probably having iron that was oxidizing rusting in the fluid around my joints, aka arthritis. So if you deal with arthritis, again, this could be a micronutrient deficiency, or it could be a micronutrient toxicity. Either way, something is out of balance. So Wendy asked me, how do you feel about methylated supplements? Well, Wendy, there is a lot of discussion going on about methylated supplements, especially methylated vitamin B. I am MTHFR positive. I have both of them. I am heterozygous, meaning I have 2 on each of them. And here's the thing. I do not do well with methylated vitamin B. So everybody's a little bit different. Sometimes we need to have other things tested like homocysteine. So I always say, if you don't feel better when you're taking a supplement after, I'm not saying the first couple of days, because sometimes your body has to adjust, but if you've taken something for 30 days and you don't feel better, you even maybe feel worse, then we need to look at maybe your body is just not doing what it's supposed to be doing with those vitamins. And sometimes for methylated vitamins, people do have a problem with it. Some people do better. All right, so right here, I think it's important to remember that it's balance that we're looking for. And I like to call this the Goldilocks zone. So if we have too little of something, we have a deficiency, and we have too much, we have a toxicity. When it's just right, when it's balanced, we are in the Goldilocks zone. Both deficiency and toxicity are stressors to the body, okay? Even if it's a toxicity of something that we think is good for us, all right? So if we're unable to handle the stressors, this is when we feel stressed, either spiritually, which could be energetically, emotionally, or physically, or all 3. Now, below I have 5 categories of stressors. There are lifestyle stressors, there are nutrition stressors, there's communication stressors, there's environmental stressors, there are immune stressors. And I'm not going to get into all of these today, but I do want you to understand that stressors, okay, affect us all the way to the cellular level. And the health or dysfunction of the cells affects your tissues. Remember I talked about hair, it's a tissue. Organs, organ systems, and the whole human organism, you, all right? So why I like the cell blueprint is it helps us to see what 3 things actually make a cell healthy, all right? So I'm going to kind of go through this little circle here for you to see, because we're going to kind of pretend like this is a cell. And a cell needs to be able to make energy. It needs to be able to make energy for you to feel energy, but it also needs to make it just so it can do all the processes. And if you look over here to the left, it says provide, all right? There are 4 key areas you need to consider for improving the health of your cells. And when we look at this, these are the 4. Going to go just over them quickly. Number 1 is micronutrient sufficiency versus micronutrient deficiency, our topic for today. All right. Micronutrients or vitamins and minerals are fundamental for thousands of processes in the body, not just a few, thousands. Critically important processes simply don't happen in the body without proper amounts of all the different vitamins and minerals. Y'all, we don't get to pick. We don't get to say, well, I like these 3, right? Everything from hormone balance to detoxification, to red and white blood cell production, to energy production, to neurotransmitter balance, to immune function, everything hinges on proper micronutrient levels. Without them, simply put, nothing will work properly. All right. Number 2, we see this little oxygen right here. Good circulation versus inability to deliver oxygen throughout the body. Just going to let y'all know I have a masterclass coming soon called The Power of Oxygen, Mastering Oxygen Deliverability for Optimal Health and Wellness, that you're invited to come to in March. All right. And then the third one right here, this right here, does anybody know what those little H's and C's and O's stand for? If anybody knows, feel free to let me know. I'm going to take a drink.
Water.
Water. Well, we do know that two H's and one O, H2O is water, and we do see some H's there that stand for hydrogen, just like it does for water. So this is a chemical little thing. I'm pretty sure that's glucose, just to let y'all know.
Oh, okay.
So here we have a bunch of carbons, a bunch of hydrogens, a bunch of oxygen. That's what you are made up of. In case you didn't know, y'all are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Okay. And those same things are what make up micronutrients. They all just have their own little symbols. Okay. And so glucose or fatty acid availability, that's how we get energy. We're either burning sugar or we're burning fat. We would like to be able to do both. Okay. When we're done burning our sugar, instead of going and getting more sugar, we want to be burning fat. Okay. So that way we don't become deficient in one and toxic in another. And then 4 here is, this is a picture of an organelle, such as mitochondria. That's one organelle. We have lots of different ones, but mitochondria is kind of like the energy producer. So we talk about that the most. But if we have any type of organelle dysfunction, that is going to affect our cells. Okay. The second thing we're looking at over here is a cell must be protected from damage. All right. So protection, there are 4 key areas you need to consider for improving the health of your cells. And the first is excess exposure to environmental pollutants. All right. This stands for redox imbalances. This is immune system dysregulation, and this is infection. Again, we aren't diving into all of these today, but if you don't provide your body with energy, remember the very first one was micronutrients, then you're not going to be able to protect the cell. Okay. So right here is where we started, but all of these things right here can't happen if number one, micronutrients isn't happening. That's why it's important. And then number 3, a cell must have a suitable environment. So right here, promote. There are 4 key areas you need to consider for improving the health of your cells. The first one is acid-base balance. Well, y'all, if your micronutrients are out of balance, guess what? Your acid base is also going to be out of balance. Hydration balance. Guess what? Our micronutrients are off, our hydration is going to be off. And then cell-to-cell communication. Minerals I've talked about before, but minerals are so important for your cells to communicate with each other. It's what helps you have the electric nerves going through your body, communication. So if you're micronutrient deficient all the way over here, and we go all the way around, all these are affected, and your cells cannot communicate to each other. And then last but not least is purpose. And that's the purpose of the cell, which tells the cell's purpose, tells the tissues what their purpose is, which tells the organs what their purpose is, which then tells our systems what their purpose is, which, guys, then leads to us as a human being having purpose. Did you know if you feel like you don't have a purpose, it could be because you are micronutrient deficient? Is that not crazy? Yeah, Donna's like, yeah, okay. So can you see how important this might be? We need to provide our cells with what they need to make energy. We need to protect ourselves from damage, aka toxicity. We need to promote ourselves to a suitable environment. So where do we start? Well, we can start by finding out what is stressing our cells the most and begin giving ourselves what they need to become healthy again. Because when our cells are healthy, guess what? We're healthy. You're healthy. And this is why I think a first step in knowing if you have adequate micronutrients is to start with the cell blueprint. So in my masterclass, Exploring Signs and Symptoms, Uncover the Secrets of Your Body's Message, I share this cell blueprint And I'm going to tell y'all in the workbook that's going to go along with this, I'm going to have a link to this masterclass for you inside of the workbook. Okay. And if you're interested in taking the cell blueprint, I'll have a link in the workbook and you can take it. It's free. However, if you would like me to go over it with you, then you're going to need to set up a coaching session with me, and I'll have a link in the workbook how you can do that. I have all my one-on-one clients take this cell blueprint assessment, and those in my Exceptional Holistic Health Healing Program, they take several other assessments, like 499 questions. This one is a lot less than that. This is like 60 questions out of those 499. But 499 questions really help us dial down to what may be affecting their health and blocking healing. Okay. So, on this one right here, score 3, so you'll see these different scores. Score 3, which has these questions right here that I'm going to bring up next, all right, is micronutrient deficiency. That's when you do not have the vitamins and or minerals that your body needs to create energy. So you can look right now at these questions, and we're going to use the scale that's on the top, all right? So a 0 is least, never, 0 symptoms. So if I look at question number 1, I say bleeding gums, nosebleeds, or easily bruised. If I never have any of those issues, I'm going to say a 0. I don't know about y'all, but I can't say a 0. All right. If I have minor, mild, rarely, or monthly symptoms, then I can give it a 1. And I would say I rarely have those things, but in the last year, I have had some bleeding gums, I have had some nosebleeds, and I had some weird bruises that I still can't figure out where I got them from. Okay. So I would give myself a 1 on that. But if you have weekly symptoms of those or every day, that would be a 3. So if you have a piece of paper there and you want to write down a 3, we can add these up in just a minute and you're going to be able to see where you're at. All right. So the next question that's on there is muscle fatigue or excessive soreness after exercise. So again, you're going to look at the top. Am I a 0? Am I a 1? Am I a 2? Am I a 3? Write that number down. Tingling in hands or feet and or cracks in the corners of the mouth. Now, what this means is it doesn't mean, well, I have tingling in my hands, so that's a 1. I have tingling in my feet, so am I a 2? No, if you have any of those things, it is based on how often. So if you just have tingling in your feet and none of the other things, but it's every day, that would still be a 3. All right. So go ahead, tingling in hands or feet and or cracks in the corners of the mouth, write down your number. And then the next one is restless legs. That could be during the day, or it could be while you're sleeping or while you're trying to sleep, but you can't because you have restless legs. And or muscle cramping or twitching. Again, it could be day or night. So if this is a never, it's going to be 0. If it's a 1 or a 2 or a 3, you're going to write that down. The next one is dry, scaly skin and or bumps on the back of the arms. Again, you're going to write down, is it a 0? Is it a 1? Is it a 2? Or is it a 3? And then you should have 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers that you're going to add together. All right. So when you're, I'm going to let y'all add it, but I'm going to go ahead and keep talking. If you have what I call a red score, which you're going to find out in just a minute, I call this a stop. And this is when you may want to have more testing done to kind of see specifically what micronutrients you may be deficient in. Orange is what I call a warning. And this is when you're like right on the border of red or yellow. Yellow, I call a yield. And depending on what other signs and symptoms you have, you may want to start there, or you may want to look a little deeper at micronutrients. And if you're in the green, I call this go, meaning based on your signs and symptoms, micronutrients is not an issue for you. All right. So Does everybody have their number? If your number is between 11 and 15, this is what we call the red zone. All right. If you are like between 11 and a 10, you might be like, well, Shawna, like, I'm not a 15. Well, I kind of call that an orange zone. It's still kind of a warning, y'all. Okay, we're here. We're at the low level of red, but we're there. But even if you're a 10, I kind of still call that kind of an orange zone. All right. And if you're somewhere here, 9, 8, 7, 6, this here is the yellow zone. And if you are below a 5 and below, you are in the green zone. All right. You might be saying, well, Shawna, I'm in the green zone. Do I need to stay on this call right now? You know what? Maybe you don't. Maybe you're doing great with your micronutrients. All right. But if you were red, your score was between 11 and 15, I want you to really stop and think about what that means for your health. Because so often we have those symptoms that I just listed and I just talked about, and we're told by the doctors, everything is normal. And some of you may have heard what I've heard. There's no vitamin or mineral that's going to help. Okay. Let's just say that there is a lot of research out there that would disagree. And one of the things I'm going to be adding to this workbook is some of that research. Okay. So hear me when I say that here in America, we have the most malnourished, obese people. Weight is not a sign of nutrient sufficiency. Micronutrients or vitamins and minerals are fundamental for thousands of processes, remember, in the body. Critically important processes simply don't happen in the body without proper amounts of all the different vitamins and minerals. Remember when I said everything from hormone balance to detoxification to red and white blood cell production to energy production to neurotransmitter balance to immune function, everything hinges on proper micronutrient levels. Without them, simply put, nothing will work properly. If you have some things in those other areas that are not working properly, guess what? It's a good sign that micronutrients is either deficient or toxic. Again, if you had a high amount of these symptoms, this is your body doing exactly what it was created to do, and it's letting you know there's something going on. We so often want to get mad at it, but the truth of the matter is we need to nourish our bodies. That's the title of this class, Nourish Your Body, right? So the top stressors that affect micronutrients are emotional stress. Anybody ever have an emotional stress? Yeah, they kind of like suck up the micronutrients in your body. If you have an unbalanced diet, meaning you're not getting some of those micronutrients, well, your body cannot make them on their own. It's something that needs to come in. Gut dysfunction plays a big part in that you might be taking all these things in, but your body's not able to absorb them because of your gut. And an imbalanced circadian rhythm. What's that? Well, if our circadian rhythm is off, often our micronutrients are off too. And if our micronutrients are off, guess what? It can affect our circadian rhythm. Stress affects the gut and its ability to digest the food you eat and get the nutrients required. Sometimes it's not getting enough of the right foods, or it could be that the body isn't digesting the food and getting the nutrients. So again, what can you do? Well, we can know what other areas on the cell blueprint, and this might help you know where to get started. So this is an example of somebody, might be me, that had the micronutrient deficiency is a yellow, and that's a yield. Now, when we're driving and we yield, we have to do what? We have to look both ways, right? This is why I call it a yield. In this case, if I yield and I look to the left, I can see hypoglycemia is in an orange zone, a warning. And if I look a little farther to the left, the next car, I see hyperglycemia, which is a red stop. Okay. I like to call this a roadmap because I can see here that blood sugar may be where this person, might be me, wants to start. And we might find that this person, by making some changes here, can help their micronutrients. All right. So here's the thing, glucose is a big one for many. This is like many people that take this cell blueprint. So if this is red for you, don't be surprised. It's kind of become the norm, right? And it affects your ability to get micronutrients in the cell. Because if we are insulin resistant because we had too much glucose, guess what? That also makes us micronutrient resistant. More difficulty to get those micronutrients in. And here's the other thing. We need an adequate amount of micronutrients to have optimal glucose levels. And the other way around, right? So it's always a two-way street. And if you would like to learn more about glucose and the Goldilocks zone, I have an energy masterclass called Blood Sugar in the Goldilocks Zone that I will link up to this workbook. All right. And if you are one of my Exceptional Holistic Health members and you are inside Exprensify, my learning platform, then you're able to get to that too. So here's the thing. Many people have issues with hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia can affect any organ of the body. So maybe if you took the cell blueprint assessment, maybe score 7, which is upper GI, or score 8, lower GI, are a red stop for you. In this case, this person was a yellow. Again, we yield. We kind of have to look both directions. In my master class, it all begins in the gut. I go into more detail about the signs and symptoms for the gut. We're not going to get into that tonight, but I do want you to know that if your digestive system is not working well, this is another person here that we can see upper GI and lower GI is more in that orange and red zone. All right. And so you may have a vitamin and or mineral deficiency because of this gut issue. Your micronutrients are necessary for the body to burn fat and to create energy. And studies show that micronutrient deficiency can cause as much as an 80% increase in likelihood of becoming overweight. Isn't that interesting? This means being overweight could be more about malnutrition than overeating. I know that might sound odd, but if you've ever thought maybe the body holds onto fat because it needs to be nourished. Remember earlier when I said that we could do a urine test? If you've lost a lot of fat, you might be losing nutrients. It's because your body will store everything it can if it's not getting into the cell, and now it's into the fat cells. Did you know that there are certain nutrients that can only be stored in fat cells? Okay, so again, we might be getting too much of something. We might be toxic in something, and the only place it can go is into our fat cells. And the only way we can utilize it is to be able to burn that fat. And when we burn that fat, then we're able to utilize it. So when it comes to micronutrients, I promise you do not want to be normal, okay? As I said, normal is highly overrated. 70%, y'all, that's way over 50% of the population is vitamin D deficient. 80% is magnesium deficient. 90% are omega-3 deficient. What does that mean? 70% means 7 out of 10 people are vitamin D deficient. 8 out of 10 magnesium. 9 out of 10 are omega-3. Esther Bloom shares, if you are dealing with menopause, does anybody know what a menopause is? Men have pot bellies, women have menopause. Then you could also be B vitamin deficient, choline deficient, selenium deficient, and zinc deficient. All of those deficiencies can play a part in having that menopause, okay? So here's the thing. I want you to make sure to join me for the More Energy Masterclass. Discover the secrets to balancing hormones and breaking addictions. And I'm going to give you all a little hint since you're here tonight. Micronutrients play a part in doing both. So if you'd like to continue this discussion with me, make sure to join me in our upcoming masterclass, our More Energy Masterclass. All right. So if you have increased cholesterol, high blood pressure, and inflammation, then chances are you are magnesium deficient. And if you have any of those issues, they are signs your body is stressed. And stress depletes vitamin C. If you have a high CRP, which is a sign of inflammation, and high, y'all, is just greater than 0.5, not 5, all right? Then you are probably CoQ10 and vitamin D deficient. Can y'all see how knowing about our micronutrients can give us so much information on what's going on with our bodies? Now, in my masterclass, what does the brain need? What does my brain need? If we ask the question, what is the one thing the brain needs? Well, y'all, the brain needs energy. Go ahead, Mom. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say D. I've read several things, and they're saying the majority of people that have dementia are very low in vitamin D. And for years, they told people, "Oh, don't worry about vitamin D. It's not that big a deal." And so for years, people haven't really taken vitamin D because a lot of times the doctors are saying it wasn't that important. Now they're coming back and saying, "Oh yeah, vitamin D is really important." And now we have all these people that have dementia because they've never even thought about vitamin D.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Most of the research shows that a vitamin D supplement is not going to fix the problem. Because again, why are we vitamin D deficient in the first place? Right? So some people, vitamin D is actually a fat-soluble vitamin, and we can become toxic with vitamin D if it's not doing its job, which can cause other problems. So kind of like I said with iron, I am not going to recommend a vitamin D supplement to everybody to take if you have any of these symptoms, because we need to know why you might be vitamin D deficient in the first place. And then utilize it, test to see what the problem is. And if you take vitamin D, does it increase? Lots of people take 10,000 a day, have another vitamin D test taken, and their vitamin D levels are still low. That tells us there's a problem, right? Our body is not absorbing the vitamin D, it's not utilizing it. But if you're taking it, it's going somewhere. It could actually be going into your fat cells, and you're not utilizing it, all right? So the brain needs energy. In the More Energy Masterclass, I share the top sources of energy that we were created to provide our body so we can create energy, which is also known as ATP, from those sources. Here's the thing, we need all 5 of these to be able to use the micronutrients that come into our body. If we don't, again, we may be storing micronutrients and not being able to utilize them because we don't have the energy to get them to go. All right. So here are, as Mom just said, the top 5 nutrients the brain needs. Number 1, vitamin D. Okay. Again, I'm not going to say don't take vitamin D, especially if your doctor told you to take it, but I am going to tell you, if you are going to take vitamin D, you need to make sure that you're getting out in the sun. All right. Lutein, B vitamins, turmeric and black pepper, and polyphenols. And the top 5 polyphenols to help with the brain are flaxseed, nuts such as chestnuts. Y'all, I had my first chestnut when I was in Italy. They were roasting chestnuts, so we got some. I wouldn't say I was crazy about them. They didn't have a whole lot of flavor, but I did try them. Hazelnuts, pecans, and almonds. Coffee is a great polyphenol. Here's a problem with coffee though, okay? Coffee a lot of times can have a lot of toxicity. So we have to make sure that we're getting good coffee if we're drinking coffee. Fruits, apples, berries, elderberries, goji berries, which are also known as wolfberries, and blueberries are all great polyphenols. And then veggies, broccoli, carrots, spinach, all of those are full of polyphenols that are supporting, micronutrient supportive to our brain. Lots of information that I've already shared in like 45 minutes, y'all. And there's more to come. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to be sharing in this workbook some different things for you, including micronutrients that are important for mitochondria and energy production. I'm going to tell you the first one is omega-3 fatty acids. Who's heard me talk about omega-3 fatty acids before and how important omega-3s are? All right. Another one I shared just a few minutes ago is the CoQ10. It's another one that is really, really important. It helps at the mitochondria level. And I'm going to give you a list of a whole bunch more that's going to be supportive for your mitochondria. I'm also going to include micronutrients to support the immune system. If you find that you get sick a lot, good chance that you're micronutrient deficient. And so we're going to talk about ones that could be supportive. Difference between macronutrients and micronutrients. All right. So a lot of times people really pay attention to their macros, which are proteins, fat, all right, carbohydrates. But micronutrients are also very important. So we're going to talk about the difference in those. I'm going to have a list for you so you can see. A lot of these are going to be some pictures for you just to be able to see macronutrients, micronutrients. I'm going to be sharing some different research papers where I've gotten this information that I shared tonight, plus the information that I'm going to be sharing in the workbook. And then I'm going to share my favorite ways to get micronutrients. Who would like to know some of my favorite ways that I get micronutrients? I saw my mom just a few minutes ago, Shawna, drinking one of my favorite ways that I like to get micronutrients. It's called Ningxia Red. That's one way. We're going to be talking about that next week in the 7-Day Energy Kickstarter Challenge. All right. So make sure to join me in the 7-Day Energy Kickstarter Challenge, because that is a good way, right, that we can get more micronutrients. I'm going to give you some interesting facts about micronutrients that you may not have known in this workbook. And I'm going to share 3 things micronutrients do for your body. I'm going to share where micronutrients come from. And I'm going to have a top foods list for micronutrients. All right. So all of that is going to be found in this workbook. And then I have and more below, because for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to give y'all time to ask me questions so that I can make sure that I answer those questions in this workbook. All right. So that's why those that came live get to play a part in what they're going to receive, plus anybody else that receives this later, based on what questions you'll have for me. All right.